Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. I'm back again looking at Project Longshot, and today we are going to be looking at the input system for Project Longshot, because right now we're not really doing it in the way I'd like to be doing it. Problem right now is sort of we're just going directly to the input system. We have a little bit of abstraction. We have this simple little class here which can tell us whether a button is pressed and what current mouse motion is. And apart from that, we sort of handle the interface with Emscripten and the browser here. But that's it. There's no like remapping or anything, so you can't really do sneaky stuff. And we just, when we need to know, we just ask is a given key pressed, and we just get the mouse motion. And what I'd like to do is sort of abstract it so that we have different view or different names for different things in sort of an abstraction. So we just say I want this to be the default, so later when we get some menu system we can go in and remap keys. And right now we're just looking at mouse and keyboard, but I've actually gone ahead and I've pulled out a gamepad here and I've connected it up as well. So plan is that we're also going to see if we can't get that working. So this is just a normal Xbox 360 controller. Lots of buttons involved here. Lots of axes we can play around with. And so plan is to also try and get gamepad support while we're at it. So we want to add that in as well. But sort of first things first is we need to talk about how we want to interface with this. And what I would like to do is I would like to change some of the interface here. So that right now, for example, when we need to get the mouse, we just do this. Instead, I want to sort of declare that we are looking for two axes. One of them will be up, down, left, right. The other left, right. And then I want to declare 4 different keys for motion, and actually also 2 axes for motion as well, so that we can have those also working. And so that we just sort of define defaults for them, and later on we can potentially remap them. So what I kind of want to do is, for example, for our camera here, we have an input, and I sort of want to say, so for input we also have an input axis, which is going to be pitch, so our up down motion. And I want to, hey Regulus, happy you could join us. So I want to say, for example, pitch can be mouse Y, and it's also let's just quickly take a look at which axis is up and down here. That's axis 1. So it could also be joystick 1. So I want to be able to sort of declare this kind of thing. Of course, this is completely invalid syntax at the moment, but this is sort of my goal. So that we could go here and say, okay, we stored the input, but we also have our pitch axis here, which is initialized like this. So that's sort of what I would like to be able to do. Might change a little bit of how this looks along the way, but that's my goal. So what we're going to start by doing is we are going to start by disabling all of this stuff. Probably to delete it later, but right now I want to keep it code around. And we are going to create a namespace called input. Now within this namespace we're going to have a class called axis, which is sort of our analog input. And then I want to have a class called button. And these are sort of the 2 main things we're going to be working with. Then we're probably going to want to create a couple of instances of various types or other helpers. What I want to do is I want to have something called I think we're going to call it an axis name. So what we're going to do is when we initialize an axis, first of all we get a string, which is the name of this axis, and then we're going to get a standard vector of axis names, which are going to be the defaults. And import vector. Same idea for buttons is that they have a name, which is sort of what we're going to refer to them as in-game. And then we have defaults for them as well. So in theory, not here, over in our camera class, this pitch thing is now valid. Now, kind of weird thing is that for this mouse Y the mouse Y position is an absolute axis, whereas a joystick is a relative axis. Probably want to do something where we split those things out a little bit, because we're not interested in sort of the absolute position of the mouse, but we'll get to that later. So what we would like to do is sort of, instead of down here where we get the mouse input from the input, which won't work anymore, instead of this, we're going to take our pitch axis here and just call get on it, and that will just give us sort of the current pitch. I need to import this apparently, so that on an axis we would also have a float get, which gets the current value. And the same idea on our button is we're going to have a get, which gets whether the button is currently pressed or not. So that's sort of what we want to do. So we could set our camera up to use all of this now. So we have a pitch axis, we also have a yaw axis, then we have input buttons. So we have forward, backward, left and right buttons. Actually, we're just gonna merge these up like that. So that means that this would then become, am I doing this right? No, I'm not. Rotation along the y-axis is a yaw and pitch is along z-axis. So this would be yaw.get. And this would, instead of key W, it's going to be forward.get. Key S is backward. So we're going to say backward.get. A is left. So this is left.get. And this is right.get. There we go. So we need to initialize a lot of fields: backwards, forwards, left, right, and yaw. We're going to just split this up over multiple lines because there are going to be a lot of initializations here. I kind of want to place this. So for yaw, we're going to call this control yaw. This is going to be sort of a printable name later, and it is going to be based off of the mouse X coordinate and the joystick 0 axis. Then we're going to have forward. It's going to be called forward. It is going to be based off of key W. Will be the single default for that. Backward will be called backward. Surprise, surprise. And we are gonna base that off of key S. Left will be called left. Actually, it'll be called strafe left. That will be key A. And finally, right is going to be called strafe right, and it is going to default to key D. There we go. We also have up and down, shift left, and space. So what we'd like to do is go up and down. So we have up, which we are going to call jump. It is going to be based off of keys, just space for now. Probably going to abstract that away a little bit. And down is going to be called, what do we usually call it? I'm just going to call it down right now. And we're going to base that off of both shift left and shift right. There we go. That means we can correct this to be down get and up get. There we go. See if how much of this will actually compile. I'm expecting not a lot. Having trouble picking up GLM. Interesting. Well, should probably include GLM in the proper way this time. We have this wonderful external folder here. So we are going to pull in GLM to here. And then we're going to include that. Because apparently I've broken something along the way here. So we're going to go grab GLM. Whatever the latest version is. Downloads. So this looks like an alpha version. I'm going to skip that. We're going to grab the 7-zip version. Great. So I'm just going to dump that into the correct directory. Kernel. Pull from GLM. So now we have a GLM folder here, and we just need to point at that apparently. So CMake here we have a link directory, external GLM. Try that again. So we have a redefinition as a different type of symbol here because we're still saying input is a class, which it no longer is. And we actually don't need to store the input system anymore. We're just using that temporarily to create our inputs. In fact, our various axes here probably need to get the input system passed in so that they know where to look. Or maybe not. No, I don't think so. They should know what the input system is. So in principle, there's no point in passing in the input system here. It just magically works, is the magic plan here. No matching constructor. Yeah, because right now we're just going to we're going to say that axis name is an alias of a standard string for now. It's not going to keep being that, but for now it is. And then we have the old input system still exists here. So we are just going to say if 0, killing off all of this code, and then recompile. So it's trying to create the input system. We are not going to create that input system anymore, and we're not going to pass it in here. I can see there's been a change to Emscripten in the meantime. So that's fun. Anyways, we get a lot of unresolved symbols. We're going to look at this deprecation at some other time. But we're getting a lot of unresolved symbols. Surprise, surprise, to button and axis and their get functions and constructors, which is what we would expect. So what we want to do is we want to hit this, and we're going to be starting to implement some of this. Now the general input class here is actually somewhat reasonable. So what we're going to do is we are going to move this down so that it stays within our namespace. And then we are going to call it something other than input. We are going to call it raw input. Because it actually allows us to do a lot of what we want to do. So that's good. Great. So what we are going to do over here is, in fact, we're not going to ignore this. We're just going to rename stuff. So all of what we do here is going to be in the namespace input in order to scope it the same as everything else. And then rather than being input raw here, it's raw input. So we just need to get that corrected all the way down. Great. So we have our wonderful casts here in our callback functions that also need to have to be corrected. But apart from that, it should be good. So no member key down in namespace input. That's because this is supposed to be raw input key down, and ideally I think we do it without that because we are in that class. So that should be even better. And if without an elif. Great. So now we are going to take a look at our button. So for buttons, what we are going to do is we are going to have a list of keys, and we're going to initialize that based on the defaults that we are given. So privately, we hold a standard vector of access name. No. Standard vector of button names, which is also just going to be a standard string for now. So these are the keys that we're going to be checking for, or buttons. Okay, thing is, we kind of want to abstract because these might both be mouse and keyboard buttons, and right now we're only checking keyboard. So this is where it gets interesting. So what we are going to do is we're going to have to be a little bit creative, I think. Because they could also be joypad buttons in principle. Sure, I can turn down the music a bit. That should be the music down a little bit. So we've got this going. Yeah, we're just gonna look at it as keyboard keys for now, and then we're gonna expand it later, reorganize it, just get the new structure working first. So we initialize our keys. Right now we just ignore the name. We're gonna use that later when we start remapping stuff. So in order to tell if our button is pressed, what we want to do is we want to make this raw input thing into a singleton so that we can initialize it when we need it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the constructor private, and instead we're going to have a raw input reference get, or static raw input reference get instance classic name, and then we are going to have a raw input pointer, which is our instance here, which is also going to be static. And then we are going to do a little bit of stuff here, because then we can say raw input get the instance, and then we're going to ask if, what we're going to do is we're going to go for every key in our keys. If said key is pressed, then we consider this button to be pressed. So if any of the indicated ones are pressed, this one is pressed, and otherwise it's not pressed. So that should be it. Now, of course, we need to get instance stuff, because that's now missing. So what we do is we go for our raw input, get instance, and then if our current instance is null, then we're going to instantiate this. Instance is a new raw input. Because it's a singleton, I'm not really caring about garbage collection, because we're only going to ever instantiate that one. And then we return a dereference of the instance. And now we just need to say that we have a raw input pointer called raw input instance. Good that it's the volume's better. And that's initialized to null.